In this week's news roundup, we start with Diablo 4 having the exact same predictable problems that everybody expected it to have, because this happens every time for Blizzard. We had the early Diablo 4 beta, and obviously the test servers absolutely couldn't handle it at all. People had lengthy queue times of over 87 minutes, and even if you hit the end of the queue, there was no guarantee you were going to get in anyway. You could just get an error message and have to start all over again. This might be what they refer to as the dreaded Error 37 message, which I suffered with to the point where I just gave up and waited for a while. I have no idea why in a Diablo game, Blizzard couldn't have just gone, okay, this is probably going to crush our servers. Make sure we have an ability to make it single player and play offline. That'd be good, wouldn't it? No, we're just going to make everyone wait in a queue for hours under limited playtime. It's a great idea, it really was, because it's not even like other multiplayer games where they wait for the server space to actually run the instance of the game. Blizzard couldn't even get people through their authentication servers to get into the game in the first place. Now, also during the beta, some people are complaining about performance issues. Not something I suffered from myself, but when I entered the city, sometimes you could just be running into the doorway of the city waiting for it to load for minutes at a time. I've also had times when I'm running around an area thinking, aren't there meant to be enemies here? And I'm pretty sure they haven't loaded and they just appear all of a sudden. So the beta is certainly not without its issues. But if you are trying to get in, they do warn that if you're in the queue, do not leave it even if the timer goes, because you're still in the queue and leaving it will kickstart everything again. And the timers, they're not accurate either, although they do promise that will be improved for the open beta, which is coming around later. But if you are interested, then the details we know about future dates. The release date is June 6th, and currently running this weekend is the early access weekend for pre-orders, where you can go up to level 25. And this early weekend is limited to the prologue and Act 1, and I believe you're limited to 3 characters, Barbarian, Rogue, and Sorceress. If you're interested in the open beta though, that will run from March 24th to 27th, so then anyone can decide if they want the game without having to pre-order it. And as far as balance goes, I've been playing Sorceress and had absolutely no issues. It's insane. And I've seen people play Barbarian and complain about the damage it does, so the classes definitely need some adjusting before we hit release. As from what I saw of Barbarian gameplay, it is not balanced at all. Fortnite now about to get user-generated content on another level from what we've had before. Creative mode is already very popular in Fortnite, except now they're adding the Unreal editor to it. This allows far more abilities, like you can import custom assets, models, materials, even to the point where people will be able to make their own islands directly in Fortnite. And although it won't enable the full range of Unreal Engine tools, you can contribute from everything from modeling to textures, animations, and audio, and you'll even be able to do it all in real time with other people. Now, this is just a beta launch for the tool, and Epic say they'll continue to evolve it, add more functionality over time. And honestly, even since the game of Quake 3 and Total Conversion mods, where you would take a game, turn it into an entirely other game, and people would continue to play it for years, that was some of the most innovative time when it came to gaming. Yeah, developers can develop as much as they want, but they'll never be able to make the same kind of content that an infinite amount of players will be. So I'm always for more tools that allow you to make maps and mods, and I think Fortnite are going to need it, because they do have a small problem on hand when they've just been ordered to pay $245 million to players who were apparently tricked into unwanted purchases. They've been ordered to pay $245 million because they were tricking players with dark patterns into making unintentional purchases, and this would also allow children to make purchases without the involvement of a parent. Apparently, they were using design tricks, including counterintuitive, inconsistent, and confusing button configurations that would actually get people to buy items that they never intended to make in the first place. And I can see how it can be done. Everyone's had a pop-up on a screen when you just wanted to get to another menu, and you're spamming for the menu, and you just automatically accept whatever it is, without even seeing what appeared on your screen, just because you were pressing those buttons in the first place. Or on certain screens, you could switch the confirmation and deny buttons over. It does make sense. I think the bigger problem is how Epic actually responded when people were like, I didn't mean to make this purchase, what's happening, can you refund it? And they just said, no. Epic began locking the accounts of people who disputed unauthorized charges with the companies, rather than just removing the content from their account in the first place. They have now been prohibited from using dark patterns to get people to purchase things, as well as being ordered to stop blocking customers who charge back on their accounts. So if things get more difficult to purchase in Fortnite, now we know why. And given human nature, this is inevitably going to harm their bottom line, because every single click you make somebody do loses customers. So even when it comes to legitimate purchases, I think this could go on to have a far bigger impact than $245 million for Fortnite. Forspoken has been a troubled game for Square Enix. It really didn't come out to rave reviews, getting only 56% positive on Steam, and launching at its peak with just 12,500 players, which even 10 days later had already dropped to a quarter of that size. This was a game few people were interested in playing, and quite a lot of people wanted to see the disaster of it on Twitch, but overall it came and went without making much of a splash anywhere. So it's not surprising then that Square Enix came out and said, we've got lackluster sales in this department. Although I did find it funny that just before saying our sales have been lackluster, they said the game has yielded results that will lead to improvement of our development capabilities in other games in the future. So in other words, we made this game so trash that we now know the exact opposite to do for the next game. I don't know why Square Enix had to dumpster dive this hard to work out what trash was in the first place, but apparently they had to experience it before they could truly comprehend how awful their ideas were. And who knew that trash could be this expensive? But it's come out that Forspoken's budget was $100 million. Where did the money go? Because it certainly didn't go on the script writing, despite that being where the number has come from, as it is the LinkedIn account of the game's lead writer, who described Forspoken as a AAA video game with a $100 million budget. And it's not like this game failing was nothing for Square Enix, when they've already said themselves that it's posed a considerable risk to the parent company, and it underperformed so badly that the developers, they closed them down essentially and put them into other places throughout the company. And of course, we can't forget that the publisher's president did recently step down, and do we really think if he'd been releasing hit after hit, then he would have had to have stood down from his position? Maybe that's why no one can understand the figure. How does something this awful cost so much money? Maybe they've added a zero. Or how could $100 million get you a Metacritic score of 64, or even in the most generous of reviews, still being described as exceptionally mid? No, I think when it comes to Forspoken, they did have a target audience in mind. It's just not one that really exists in any numbers. Over to Razer now, and they've got an interesting way to launch a product. In this way, it's a glass mouse pad, which has apparently been coated to make it silent for your mouse. Although that's not really the point. I'm not sure who they think gamers are, or rather, how stupid gamers are, but they do have the most glorious safety warnings that I've ever seen in a product. With the first one being, please don't set fires using it as a magnifying glass for the sun. Don't hold it up in front of your face and glare directly at the sun, you lunatics. And we would appreciate it if you didn't use it as a weapon to smash other people over the head with. Now, I've always thought that safety warnings on a product generally came from lawsuits, that somebody did something stupid like, okay, we've got to warn everyone else so we don't get sued for it again. But in that case, what have you been doing in your offices, Razer? This is tempered glass. Who's hitting somebody over the face with it? I bought loads of products that could be used to attack somebody and never got warned about it. Maybe Razer are just being extra cautious with all that COD rage going around recently. Although I should say, if you're likely to do any of these, I'm not really sure how you got the mousepad in the first place, as it is a mousepad that does cost $99. Speaking of Call of Duty, Sony is still incredibly angry at the Microsoft Activision deal, saying that now Microsoft will make Call of Duty a de facto exclusive because they would have the incentive to essentially price Call of Duty off the PlayStation marketplace. I think they're looking for any loophole to argue when Microsoft have repeatedly said, look, we'll sign an agreement to give it to you for a decade. We're going to keep releasing it on your console. So now their only choice is to argue that maybe they'll just make it cost £140 and no one will buy it. Because Sony are now saying that rather than just not putting on the console in the first place, they could make the game far cheaper on Xbox through things like putting it on Game Pass, or giving it to Sony at a price which just no one would even buy it for in the first place. Now this to me just seems like a way to get Microsoft to not put it on Game Pass, as that would admittedly be a huge advantage for them in the first place. Admittedly, they would lose a load of money in sales, but if you can make that up in microtransactions over time, and use it to increase your share of the console market over time, then it could eventually get them more money if they want to play the long game. So I don't think Sony is unreasonable to actually be worried about this, but considering all the extra bonuses and content that Sony has had with Call of Duty before this purchase, I'm not sure they have the best footing to talk about a fair playing field when it comes to Call of Duty. The Last of Us now, and Neil Druckmann refuses to get pinned down on whether he's going to make The Last of Us 3 or not, but apparently the decision has already been made about what game they're going to make next, saying we picked the thing we're most excited for. When you decide to make a game, there needs to be a fire that you have to sustain for years to come, and if you pick the wrong product, then you will be burnt out before the product even reaches completion. I think that's how you end up making a mediocre product, if you lose your excitement for it. Now obviously, for a long time now, there's been rumors about The Last of Us multiplayer, and it looks like that's the game that's going to be coming out next, which is presumably what he's talking about here. The reason he won't say it's The Last of Us 3 is because it isn't. And let's face it, with the reception of The Last of Us 2, you can understand why The Last of Us 3 wouldn't be the top priority for him to choose. How do you even continue that story when everybody hated that story to begin with. Combine that with the television series as they move into The Last of Us Part 2, which they've now said they're going to split up The Last of Us Part 2 into multiple different television series, which I'm just assuming is to extend that golf moment before you lose your entire audience over there as well. I could understand why they want a different game to come out in the first place, because I think a lot of television viewers probably don't even know what's coming for them in the next series. If they're a big fan of Joel, they won't want to know what's coming, and Last of Us 3 would definitely kick up enough PR stink that they would probably learn about it, whereas multiplayer's safe and preserves their little TV series over there while also allowing them to release new content. So if he wants to maximize his success, staying away from The Last of Us 3, I think, is probably for the best. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know what you thought of any of the topics down below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe, more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.